that has happened. There are several Federal Register notices out, but that is a notice of proposed amendment. It is a quite intensive change or extensive change to the MUTCD. And just recently we received notification that the comment period has been extended to, I believe it was May 14th. I will ask Anthony to confirm that for me, but
that's correct, Carla. It's May 14th that it got extended to.
So yes, if you use the MUTCD or are familiar with it, you may want to take a look at that notice of proposed amendment.
All right, thanks. I don't see Dallas on. If he's not, Steve Boshin, do you have any announcements from ADOT?
Absolutely, Steve. So I want to compliment Carla on the pronunciation of burgess. I don't know if I have it yet, but it sounded pretty good when she said it, and hopefully I did okay too. Not too much to update from ADOT. The MUTCD is ongoing. Feel free to comment on it and feel free to send your comments to Mesa Hannah with our traffic group. As you guys know, it is the start of the legislative season. There's a lot of unique bills being proposed. I'm going to leave it at that. And we are the fortunate recipients of some CARES Act funding, so there's a lot of scrambling for how that should be spent. But you guys all have been through this before. The legislative session goes on for a long time. Hopefully it's shorter this year, but we'll probably see something maybe by the end of May in terms of what comes out for transportation funding. That's all I have, Steve.
All right, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I think that all the federal DOT employees got the recording of how to say, what's his name's name? Buttigieg. No, I think I butchered that. Our speaker today, Brad Burgess, is somewhat new to ADOT. He was born in Pittsburgh and went through high school there, then joined the Army for 22 years. And after coming out of the U.S. military, he landed in Phoenix with his family. He's been with ADOT for 3 years. Many of the people on the call from the engineering consultant community may have first met Brad. And he was a lean coach, and if not then, he was in the partnering group and helped facilitate some partnering efforts, and particularly a group of ACEC and ADOT people. He's been the broadband coordinator for a year now, started last February, and he's going to, if he doesn't tell us all we wanted to know about broadband in Arizona, he'll be glad to answer questions when it's over. So thank you, Brad, for agreeing to do this presentation, and it's all yours.
Thanks, Steve. And thanks, Justin and Amerigo, for helping me out this morning, get this set up. I appreciate this opportunity. And so it's always tough kind of following Steve Jimenez with his dad jokes. And I feel like when I give a presentation like this, I'm supposed to say something smart, witty, or funny. And those that know me know that I'm neither smart, witty, or funny. So I'm going to give you my best attempt here at some things I've been thinking about. So on the screen, which hopefully everybody can see, I'm going to call this the Happy Wednesday Things to Think About slide. And so I'll give you a second to ponder over some of these things.
Well, you got me beat.
All right. So hopefully you enjoyed those, just with more time on my hands with COVID and I'm saving time driving to work. I just, I think a lot, and those are some of the things I've been really, trying to solve. So hopefully one day we'll figure those things out. All right. With these virtual meetings, I know that, they're always tough and stuff. So I'll try to get through kind of like the overview here kind of quickly and then just really open it up to discussion. So I guess in the spirit of, kind of virtual meetings and engagement, if you're ready to see the best broadband ACEC ADOT presentation on a Wednesday morning of this year, go ahead and give me ready in the chat. All right. I see some readies going on there. Thanks for doing that. All right. So I'll cover a few things today. So really kind of just the background, the current state, a few broadband projects we have going on some of the interstates, also kind of what we have planned for the future. Then again, like I said, we'll try to get right into the questions and discussions. And so in ADOT, when, and a lot of you have heard about our AMS journey, our Arizona Management System journey, when we try to problem solve and use lean tools, one of the big words that we've added to our vocabulary is the word gap. Gap is, basically you have a problem and you know what your current state is and you know what your future state, where you want to be. And between those two things is the gap. And so this is my best attempt at trying to show you the gap in broadband from a national perspective. And so, Dan Corey and some others, have been at this a lot longer than I have, so they can, speak a lot more to it. This just kind of is a great visual in my mind that out here in the Southwest that we do have a gap in broadband across some of these major trunk lines. And so part of our plan is to and try and fix that and try to bridge that gap a little bit. And I'll show you a couple examples of what we're doing. So this is actually one of the first things, and this is actually how the ADOT broadband office started about a year ago, was that the governor of Arizona came out and started making a couple announcements about initiatives within broadband. And so one of the first things that you see here is a news article from about a year ago that mentions that Governor Ducey wanted to basically declare I-17, I-19, and I-40 as broadband corridors. Once that happened, obviously, right, in the military, we always called a thing called like an implied task, that you're told something, but that there's things that you don't have to be told that you have to go back and do. So that's kind of what happened within ADOT, is that we're being told that, hey, this is the future state, I-17, I-19, I-40. However, we're one of those states, there's not many of them. I think there is last time I checked, about 70% of states actually allow longitudinal access along their controlled access interstates. And so we were, in that minority category where we were still not allowing that. So we kind of took on that applied task of saying, we got to figure this thing out and figure out how we're going to allow longitudinal access, still maintain the safety and integrity of the highway systems, and also try to help bridge this broadband gap. So a couple things with my office. My office, again, was stood up about a year ago. Right now, it's still me, myself, and I. I am hiring 2 positions here very soon. One will help with permits, with standardization, and the other will actually be a broadband project manager, which will help with, the master lease agreements, the GIS mapping features, anything dealing kind of with mostly the non-transportation features of broadband. And I keep throwing around that term broadband, and I should have mentioned that at the beginning, but when we're saying broadband for this purpose, we're mostly talking about wired fiber optics. We do plan on eventually having wireless included in this as well, as far as 5G, small cell. We're not quite there yet, but we do plan on of having a program in place for that. And so within the ADOT broadband office, we're trying to basically do 3 things, 3 objectives or 3 goals. And one is reduce barriers. And we're working on that a couple different ways, right? And so the longitudinal access was a barrier that people have already approached us, many telecoms, about saying, hey, I'd like to build fiber from Phoenix to Flagstaff or from New Mexico to California along I-40. And so we're trying to reduce those barriers. So allowing longitudinal access is one area that we're looking at. We're also trying to standardize and make the permit process more efficient. in a lot of different areas. And so we're working with that team right now, and actually we're off to a great start and have some great momentum. We've worked with a couple utilities here recently, such as Verizon and Zayo, and had some good feedback from some of the continuous improvement sessions that we've done with them. And so we've implemented some training. We've actually trained some of the permittees, and we're seeing an increase in the quality of submissions of permits just from implementing just a couple training tools that were already out there that we just basically leveraged and took advantage of. The second bullet, right? Not a big surprise here that ADOT's dog in the fight, if you will, is transportation. A lot of people think, that ADOT is in charge of this broadband effort across the state of Arizona. And we are obviously a significant part of it due to the roads, and the roads are the quickest way between point A and point B. And so, however, we're just a piece of the puzzle right now. Arizona Commerce Authority is led by the state broadband director is Jeff Sabaka, and he's kind of leading the overall charge. And so with him in the governor's office, ADOT has obviously asked to kind of help out and facilitate a lot of these broadband efforts. But again, people sometimes will think that ADOT, we get calls from all around the state saying, hey, I want some broadband on my road. I want some broadband built down here, near Douglas or here and there. And so they don't really realize that we're just kind of facilitating and delivering these projects for the governor's office and the Arizona Commerce Authority. They're kind of the ones that kind of will tell us, hey, let's do I-17, let's do I-19, let's do I-40. Again, ITS is our, is what our need is. We're not trying to become a telecom. We're not trying to compete with telecoms. All we are trying to do is try to anywhere that there's fiber being put in our roadways, we're trying to, work out a trade or a swap to get some transportation fibers in return. So we can connect to those traffic sensors, the ramp meters, to the DMS boards, all that kind of stuff. And so that's, one of our main focus areas. And then the last one, of course, is again, kind of as I mentioned, is that together, I think all of us, as we do this, will be able to expand broadband and connect Arizona. As you remember from the first map I showed you, there is a gap, and in order for us to fix that gap, we can't do it alone. So we'll kind of do this as a team effort. And stop me at any time if you have any questions. You could either throw something in the chat or just go ahead and unmute and just feel free to ask me. I've talked with a lot of our neighboring states. They're, most of them are more mature than we are in their broadband program, especially UDOT. Colorado, I've talked with New Mexico, Nevada, even some out there out east, talk with Iowa, Tennessee, a few others. And FHWA, Carla, you and your team have been great champions and helping us with this, because I know Tony and Kimberly have got me in touch with a few of those people that I just mentioned. And, it's like the answers for the test are out there. We just have to go out there and kind of take those answers and try to make them fit for Arizona. So, it's challenging, but at the same time, a lot of the groundwork has been laid before us. We just have to kind of figure out what works for Arizona. And so again, this slide here again is just reinforcing the point that ITS is our main focus area. And, I talked to Brent Kane, the division director for TISMO. I have asked him before, hey, where do you want, where would you want, for these trades and swaps, where would you want fiber, for transportation? And he says, Brad, there's not a road in Arizona that I wouldn't want, fiber on eventually. We may not use it for 5, 10, maybe longer years, but, just to start thinking about that, because we all know kind of that bottom left picture there in the quadrant, that's the direction we're going. And so we know that it's coming. And I think we all remember the days, we had those floppy disk drives, those 3.5-inch floppy drives. And we thought that was like the best thing ever. I remember carrying those around and thinking that we'll never need anything more, man. I got my floppy that holds, what did they used to hold? I think 8 megabytes or 16 megabytes and good to go. And now all of a sudden we got terabyte drives, and fiber is no different. I hear from people, and Dan can probably attest to it, that, 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 16 fibers, that was enough. Everybody has, that's more than we'll ever need. And now, we got 144, 288 cables going through. And we just don't know what the future holds. It seems like, obviously, data, the need for data is not slowing down. I told you I was going to show you a quick little glimpse of the current state. And so this is state-owned conduit. So state-owned, I'm talking ADOT. And so this is part of our FMS system. And as you can see, Metro Phoenix pretty much has fiber conduit along all the major routes, the 202, the 303, the 51, the I-10 as it comes through. You see a little spurt along I-10 towards Tucson, and then you see it pick back up again around Tucson. I think this gap right here is planning on getting filled with the GRIC expansion that they're still in the planning phases of. And then I believe this gap down here, I haven't talked with Brent specifically about this recently, but our TISMO division director, I believe that he has a plan as well to fill in this gap, which would get us Phoenix to Tucson. And then of course we do our right now currently SR 189, we are installing fiber along that project. And so I like numbers. I like trying to quantify things. And when we look at this, we basically have around 1,200 interstate miles total. And right now we have approximately 129 miles completed. And, a lot to go. So we're at about 11%. And so you might ask, well, why is the interstate important? Why are you worried about interstate miles? And so obviously, it's like, it's like the trunk of a tree, that these major trunk lines will feed these middle miles or the branches of a tree that ultimately need to connect to these communities out there in Arizona that are in desperate need. And COVID has only magnified that. COVID has only made that need for broadband even greater. And so that's why there is an initial focus on some of these long haul routes, if you will, or these major trunk lines. But again, middle mile is important as well. And I'll get to that in a second. Future state. I added in a couple yellow lines. These are the projects that I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit, was that we currently we're delivering I-17 as a CMAR. We're doing I-19 as a design build. That RFQ and RFP has not been out yet for the design build. The contractor has already been selected for the CMAR. And then I-40, that just recently came out, probably 2 weeks ago, when the FY22 state of Arizona budget was released by the governor. There was a section in there that mentioned that the governor wanted to dedicate $32 or $33 million towards building I-40 from Flagstaff to the California border. And so once we get out towards Lake Havasu, we're not exactly sure of the exact route. We're still focusing on these two projects right now. And we want to kind of find some best practices and lessons learned of these delivery methods. And then that way we can apply those principles to I-40. So we haven't had much discussion about I-40 yet, but that will be in the future as well. All right. So a couple more slides here, then we'll open it up here. So a couple of the state strategy focus areas, and this again is high level. This is more the governor's office and not necessarily ADOT. This is the governor's office and the Commerce Authority. Is that again, they want to expand that middle mile connectivity because that's where it's really at. The days of build it and they'll come, I won't say are over, but they probably don't work like they used to. And so just because you have these trunk lines doesn't mean people will connect to them. So we got to really focus on expanding that middle mile connectivity. We also want to reduce regulatory hurdles that inhibit wired and wireless connectivity. And so an example of that, actually, I'm going to save that for the next slide. I'll get into a couple of the proposed legislation features that I'll discuss. And then close the funding gap for privately owned and operated last mile projects. And so that's also going to be discussed a little bit on the next slide. But there was a House bill that was recently introduced that was either 5 million or 10 million. I know they flipped it back and forth. I apologize. I have to look at it. It's either 5 million or 10 million. That's going to be dedicated towards grant money that the Arizona Commerce Authority will be looking to help fund those middle mile and to increase the rural connectivity. So these are the couple of proposed initiatives that I mostly wanted to kind of talk about. And so the state as a whole is going to publish a state broadband goal and strategic plan, right? It has to kind of start there. They have one from 2018. I think they're just going to kind of amend it. I think it was just one of those cases of they didn't know what they didn't know, and now they realized, that this is a little bit bigger than we thought, and so they're working on a state broadband goal and strategic plan. House Bill 2596, and I'll put a link to that in the chat in a second. That's introduced legislation that was just introduced probably about less than 2 weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago. And a couple main focus areas of that House bill are to kind of help us bridge those gaps that I talked about before. So one of them would be to open the state rights of way for commercial use, meaning that we would open up longitudinal access on controlled access roadways. We'd obviously do it in a very controlled and prescriptive manner. We have a utility and railroad working group, and actually we have a couple partners, from FHWA as well as the ADOT technical groups that works with us in that working group. And we're trying to establish the process for allowing utilities, just broadband only. We're not, right now we're not talking water, gas, sewage. We're talking broadband, fiber optic, to allow them longitudinal access to interstates. And so we don't want it to be a golden ticket. We want it to kind of be, a case by case, a special case basis is actually what we're calling it. And at the same time, we're not trying to make it so difficult. We just want to make sure that we really think about this, the long-term effects, and do this the right way. We also want to open excess, and excess is the key word, state-owned conduit for commercial use. And what that means is on that map that I showed you, we have a, I don't know if a crap ton is probably not the right, maybe it's a metric ton is what I want to say. But we have a lot of excess capacity along along where we currently have conduit. And so we generally have 3-inch conduits on both sides of the road. And that's just our standard for redundancy purposes. That's the standard that was, I don't know when it was started, but I know that we've seen infrastructure that was built before then, and it doesn't have the same setup as far as like 3-inch conduits. And we run into problems. You're quickly out of space due to some of the factors that I mentioned before, that this need is only growing, especially when you add power and electric cables that have to connect to these cameras and high-speed devices. So it just kind of quickly clogs up a lot of that space. So in the places that we do have excess state-owned conduit, we do want to open that up for commercial use. And so that's one of the initiatives that is being proposed in the broadband legislation as well. And then lastly, in that bill, I think, there's other things, but I think the main thing that I wanted to kind of mention was, in order to reduce barriers as well, when you think about this, so ADOT's going to have this fiber conduit, running along I-17 from Phoenix to Flagstaff. So we're hoping that we're going to get some interest that, Cox, Zayo, Sparklight, CenturyLink, Lumen, that they'll, be interested in and kind of want into here. And so we all know that we're only on, the land that is not owned in fee by ADOT, from point A to point B, we're in there by easement. And so the easements are for transportation purpose only. And so we're good to go all day long as far as we're able to put in fiber and connect to our ITS devices, because within that easement language, we're already squared away. However, as soon as these third parties start coming in, they would have to literally go to each underlying landowner. If it's a private owner, they got to go to Susie or Billy Bob and get their permission, just like they do every single day now when they do an encroachment permit. And then for those other easements, such as tribal, BLM, U.S. Forest Service, Arizona State Land, same thing. They would have to kind of go one by one and ask permission. And that's obviously a very cumbersome process. It's a barrier. And with those private landowners, it could also obviously almost be some sort of like a gold mine effect, where after the first 5 people come to you asking for permission, you're kind of catching on now. And, one person could literally be a showstopper for that whole 134-mile route, that if you have one person who just wants to be a showstopper, could shut down the whole thing. So the legislation will actually give away it's identifying a process that for private land only, I'm talking about right now. So for private easements only, that we won't have to worry about that the legislation will basically is declaring broadband almost as like a critical infrastructure. And those private landowners will have a process to go and seek just compensation or grieve or a grievance process. And they're able to do that. But in the near term, you don't have to go through and ask permission for those third-party telecoms. And that's pretty huge. You know, we still have a lot of work to do. I talked with Arizona State Land Department yesterday, how we're going to try to get through their easements with third party. And then we still got a lot of work to do with our federal partners as well. And then lastly, just that House Bill 2156, which is also recently introduced. That's the grant program. And actually, I think I did update this. It is $5 million for each FY coming up, FY21, FY22, and FY23, that there's $5 million laid out for grants to help support middle mile and rural connectivity. And then last bullet, they're going to open up state facilities for 5G deployment. So those small cell devices that you see popping up in your neighborhoods and on, on the street lights and telephone poles, they're looking at opening it up to like state buildings, government buildings, downtown Phoenix, to be able to mount those devices onto there. Again, ADOT is open to that as well. We still have work to do as far as the process with that, because there's lots that goes into it. We've talked to some of our other state DOTs, and we've learned some of the challenges that are associated with that when you're starting to, talk about maintenance challenges, liability challenges as far as the amount of weight that goes onto a pole, all kind of issues that come up. So that's something future that we'll work on. Last slide. And, I know it's, kind of cheesy or corny. We always talk about the win-win. Everybody knows a win-win situation. So I try to call this a triple win, a win-win-win situation, that if, when we talk about these projects and these opportunities for broadband, that if it's, obviously a win for ADOT, for ITS, that we get something out of that, awesome, great. If it's a win for the telecoms, that they're obviously getting some commerce opportunity out of this, great. And then I think the most important, the third win, is obviously the people of Arizona. That's the ultimate goal of this, is to expand broadband, connect these communities. And so if we can make this a triple win situation, then that's what we're shooting for. So that's basically an overview of the program in a nutshell.
Any questions?
Hi, everyone. If you have any questions for Brad, please feel free to put those in the chat box, or go ahead and, again, feel free to ask them yourselves. We have no qualms about that whatsoever. At this time, I'm not seeing anything in the chat box, but I just want you to know that we are watching it. So if you do have anything that you would like to put there. Thank you, Mr. Kirchhoffer. What contractor was selected for the work on the I-17?
For the I-17 CMAR was Kiewit.
Thanks, Brad. Mr. Kirchhoffer also says thanks. Steve Boshin. Brad, current budgets for broadband are what?
Great question, Steve. So right now on the I-17 and I-19, we're currently operating off a $40 million budget, which is actually not transportation. It's not transportation money. It's not state money. It's actual federal education money. So once COVID hit, our plans for actually building I-17 ourselves with state money for transportation purpose kind of went out the window. A couple months later, that thing called the CARES Act came out, and the governor's, this is actually GEER money, so GEER, Governor's Education Emergency Relief Fund, gave us $40 million for the state of Arizona, and that is the funding being used for I-17 and I-19. So it's actually education money. We have trouble ourselves at ADOT when we're actually even planning this project, that we keep thinking this is a transportation project, but it's not. It's actually a education project, and we're partnering with Sun Corridor Network, which is a state agency. I could put a link for their website in the chat as well. So Sun Corridor Network is a public nonprofit, and I wouldn't call it, obviously, it's not a traditional P3. It's not a public-private partnership, but we're basically doing a public-public exploring a public-public partnership with Sun Corridor Network right now for them to operate and manage the actual network, since it's an education network and that's what they specialize in, K through 12 and education and research. So budget-wise, Steve, other than the 40 million, again, we got the 33 million for I-40, the $5 million grant opportunities for rural broadband. I do see a lot of other grant funding opportunities, for local public agencies, tribes, that they can obviously take advantage of. And Jeff Sabaka is the one who kind of helps them out with that. But other than that, there's no additional funding that I'm aware of at this time, with the exception of that we do plan on with this model of letting third parties into, or either our state-owned conduit or these future projects that we're building. The revenue from that would obviously go to pay for already existing maintenance and operations. That's what you always got to pay first, as well as future broadband projects. So we're kind of looking at this as almost like a cyclical, where as soon as we get enough money in the piggy bank and we've already paid maintenance and operations, that we go out and we start seeking other middle mile or long haul opportunities that could help the state grow.
Thank you, Brad.
Yep.
I do have a question here from Mr. Alfield. Brad, I've heard 6G is right around the corner. Are we prepared?
Great question. I've been reading some about it as well. And truthfully, from what I see from a lot of the so-called subject matter experts in the field, is that they say 5G, still that there's so much to leverage from 5G and there's still a way to go. So I'll be honest, I don't have, much more to say about that. I'm not sure if I'm going to deflect to Dan Corey. I know Dan Corey is a lot smarter than me on this, so I'll let Dan jump in if he had any thoughts on 6G.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're hitting the nail on the head there, Brad. We're 5G. We're trying to see how that is operating right now. And 6G, even though we were hearing that it could be a few years away, not too much planning efforts are going on right now until we understand fully what 5G is and what the needs are going to be and how 6G gets rolled out in 6th generation.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, gentlemen. I do have another question here. What about plans for I-10 LA to Phoenix?
Another great question. And so, again, if ADOT was probably in charge of the broadband program in the state, we'd probably pick I-10, just due to the amount of heavy truck traffic that we get. And, that's from conversations I've had with Brent Kane again, that, it seems like I-10 would probably be our priority. And so, if internal transportation or state funding comes available, that could be, something that we do next. But again, when we make these decisions on routes, right now it's kind of a total systems thinking, if you will, and we take education, telemedicine, rural, transportation, public safety. We take all those into account, and that's how these route kind of selections are made. So I-10 definitely, it's on the radar. That's obviously a great route, and so just no concrete plans for it right now, though.
Thank you, Brad. Any other questions for Brad? Please feel free to put those in the chat box, or to go ahead and unmute yourself and turn your camera on and ask yourself, whatever you prefer.
Brad, this is Steve. You'd mentioned talking with other states about how they've approached it. Did you learn anything relative to what not to do?
Yeah, great question. I think, the biggest thing we learned not to do was to cross that line and become a telecom. And so, to kind of, the trades and swaps are fine, but as soon as you start, crossing that line and trying, we're a transportation agency. We build roadways and bridges, and we're not trying to be a telecom. All we're trying to do, again, is just try to leverage some of our assets and conduct those trades and swaps. And at the same time, obviously, to be beneficial to the taxpayers of Arizona, to receive some benefit back from those trades and swaps in the terms of, transportation fiber. And so I think that's our goal.
Thanks. And you mentioned public-public partnership. Have you considered public-private partnership?
Yep. And I might have made up that word, public-public partnerships, I'm not sure. But the P3 we went down that rabbit hole. And so that was a few months ago. And so we did the RFI. Probably a lot of you are familiar with or saw that we sent out an RFI with about 20 questions on it. We ended up getting responses. We did an industry forum, through a virtual meeting just like this, had great participation. I think we had 150 people attend the industry forum, talked about the RFI a little bit. And then we got 22 official responses. And the responses were, as you would probably imagine, some were just straight up just contractors, construction. Some were more almost like kind of like a conglomeration of financial entities, as well as, maybe even a design builder. And so you saw some people come together and submit these RFI responses, and we analyzed. So we took all 22 responses. They were pretty lengthy. We took a couple days and actually bucketed all the information, all the responses. And what we quickly identified was there was a couple common themes. And so a couple of the common themes were that right away was a concern, here in Arizona, kind of different than UDOT. UDOT, I keep using UDOT. They're kind of the best known for their broadband program. They've been doing it for over 2 decades, and they have a great system, but they also own most of the right of way. And so right of way kind of came up as an issue, and that's one of the things we're tackling in legislation. But the thing that kind of made us shy away from the P3 was the funding. Is that I don't want to say that anybody ever imagined that people were going to be running to us, with money and funding, but I don't think we imagined the other end of it either, where, a lot of the responses were saying, yeah, we'll do this for you. Where's the money? We want the money. Or where's the funding coming from? And, with in the middle of kind of the COVID at that time, we didn't really have any good answers. And so we started brainstorming and say, hey, what other ways can we tackle this? And at the same time, we talked with Georgia DOT, and Georgia recently went through a, and I hate to call it a failed P3 experience. That's their words, not mine, but they did have some challenges on their initial P3, but now they're redoing it, P3 2.0. And it sounds like they actually have a lot better plan. And I've, also it was a tough decision because, talking with Dan and others about, other P3 benefits and advantages, it was tough. So, at the same time, never closing the door. It's not a hard no. I don't think we're ever saying we would never go back and explore that again. But for right now, we're just exploring the partnership with Sun Corridor Network just to see, how that can benefit both sides.
Thanks, Brad. I do have a question here from Dan Corey. So you pick on him, he gets to pick on you.
Yep.
Can you discuss the permit process upgrades in regards to approval times, as this is a key to the success of a project?
Yeah, absolutely. So still talking a little future state right now. So a lot of states we've noticed obviously have, one of the biggest things is electronic permitting, right? That we're trying to automate the process. One thing you can't do, and I learned this a while back, with my Lean and Six Sigma experience, is that you cannot automate a bad process. If you automate a bad process, all you're doing is just failing faster, or you're making your mistakes happen faster. And so what we're kind of doing now is two things. Is that number one, we do have, we're working with a vendor. We're already past the procurement stage, or actually testing an electronic permitting system. So that would help out big time with the efficiency, the timeliness, and then the standardization. On the back end of it, what we're doing with the team right now is we're starting to standardize, obviously, some of these processes to put into this automation. And that was lessons learned from other state DOTs, that they said that they just thought that, hey, you buy this off the shelf software and it's going to fix all your problems. And so that's, one of the main things I think we're doing, Dan. We're standardizing a lot, internally as well. Boshin, I don't know if you want to talk about any of those proposed changes for the utilities. I don't know if it's appropriate or not to discuss here, but I know you had a couple ideas that you and Randy Everett were working on.
Sorry, Brad, I had to unmute myself. So one of the big things that we have challenges with is overlash, and we're going to stop being the referee for overlash. And you guys are probably saying, what the hell is Boshin talking about overlash? So what that means in English is the CenturyLink have permission to be on APS's polls. So in the permitting process, we are not going to be the referees on that anymore. So that's going to be up to APS and CenturyLink. So some of these things are going to help our permitting process. And I think that's what Brad's talking about there. So it's multiple levels. It's both our normal permitting, but also how do we get broadband permitted? So that's what Brad's working on. I think that's all I can add, Brad.
Thanks, Steve. And then I think lastly, Dan, I think I mentioned it a little bit, but we did work with a telecom utility, actually two of them, and we started, doing a more kind of small group, working group with them. And we noticed that they were having, X amount of mistakes on their permit submissions. And so we kind of reverse engineered that, if you will, and said, okay, in order to fix these, let's get them into the ADOT road portal training. And so I'd never heard of the ADOT road portal. And so we started, we leaned on Lisa Pounds' group a lot. And we had her group give ADOT road portal training, which is this online portal that everybody has access to. And you would be surprised, like how much not only this quality submissions improve rapidly, because people never even knew that existed. It was basically the answers for the test for when they submit these permits, and they were not listing current utilities on their plans. And the reason is it was too hard. They didn't know how to go and find this stuff. And once they found out about the road portal, we're making some success there. So just some training opportunities we have amongst those other things is some of the permit efficiencies that we're working on.
Hey, Brad, was GIS part of that as well? Or will it be?
Well, GIS, that is the system that they use for the road portal. So that is, it is a GIS format that you go on and actually can look around the state of Arizona, and it's a GIS map that you go and you literally pick a segment, and the actual, and Boshan's going to yell at me. Is it as-built or record drawings? I always forget which the right word is.
They're record drawings.
Okay. So they have the record drawings on the road portal. So GIS map feature, you go and click, it actually brings up the PDF document, that'll show 10 pages, 100 pages of all those record drawings. And so GIS is incorporated in that, Dan. We're also looking at obviously incorporating that into the permitting, the new permit software as well, because one-stop shopping, you shouldn't have to go here for a GIS map, over here for another map. We're just going to overlay them and put them on top of each other.
All right. Any additional questions out there? All right, I think we're good to go. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here. Thanks as always to ADOT for providing us with some really great speakers, always high quality information, always just all around good people, except for Boshan maybe, but we'll talk about that later. And thanks again to Steve Jimenez for always being a very gracious host and excellent liaison chairperson. Steve, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I just wanted to thank Brad. It was a great presentation, a great topic, and lots of good info there. Our next meeting is March 3rd at the same time. It was a person from the consultant community that had asked about this topic. So, we're always open to hear from you guys about what you would want to hear at these meetings. So feel free to email Justin or me or Steve Boshan with a topic that you would like to hear about. With that, turn it back over to you to close, Justin.
Absolutely. Thank you guys again so much for spending your Wednesday morning with us. Please remember that next Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel, we'll be having our Maricopa County liaison with Jennifer Toth and friends, providing us with some really great updates on all things MCDOT. And that, of course, is hosted by the one and only Elijah Williams. So with that, thank you guys again for being here. Have a great week. Stay safe out there. And we look forward to seeing you either next week or right back here next month for our next ADOT liaison. Thanks so much, guys. Take care.